All right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Serious Angler Podcast, powered by our friends over at X2 Power Batteries. As always, I'm your host, Bailey Agbert, and joined with me is the captain, Mr. Andy Fole. What's going on?
Oh, not a whole lot. I apologize for the mess behind me. Literally, I threw all of my stuff in the boat this morning at like 6 o'clock before I went fishing, and just bomb went off. So, and I just got down here for the first time since this morning because, having a bunch of estrogen in my house now, it was like a bloody murder scream fest for the last 3 hours since I got home from fishing. So this is going to be a nice little unwinding for me this evening.
Yeah, I really can't fathom what you're about to go through for the next 50 years with Amanda, and I have 2 daughters.
Yeah. It's funny.
Good luck, buddy.
With everyone, I'm like, there's 3 women in my house, and it's me and my cat who's like neutered, so it doesn't count.
He doesn't count. He doesn't count.
Is it because he's an it now, so it doesn't count at all.
He's a he, she, they.
It's a shekin.
It's a shekin. Yeah. If you guys did not tune into the fantasy fishing show for Santee Cooper last night, literally Deacon tunes in. He calls in from his truck because he had horrible service. Finally comes in. It's not maybe 5 minutes into him joining us for the conversation.
Literally mid talk, he's like, "I think I'm getting pulled over."
Yeah. He's like, "Yeah, guys, can't make this up. I think a cop's pulling me over right now." And thankfully, no ticket, which I really wish he kept his live on for that. That would have been really funny. But he just had apparently they had to do a boat inspection or something of that nature. So super interesting, but it was really funny. We were probably laughing for the next 20 minutes. People were just ragging on Deacon, and it was he took it like a champ. It was a lot of fun. So if you want some laughs, highly encourage you guys go listen to the Santee Cooper preview show. Not only just for the picks, if you're playing, we're already getting it. Can we get a Shekin update?
Yeah, that's why I said Shekin.
That's perfect. Sarah, get out of jail. Sarah did not go to jail. Sarah's all right. It was a wild show last night, and I imagine tonight will be just as wild with our good pal, Mr. Alex Rudd, joining us here tonight, who you never know what you're going to get, is what I've learned in my friendship with Alex here. But it's never bad. It's just you just never know. It's always good, but you just never know what you're going to get.
I feel like Rudd and I would get along great in real life, like outside the podcast, because we're basically like the same way in ways. Like, you never know what I'm going to say, and you just never know what you're going to get with Rudd.
It's about I've learned for you to be relatively predictable, Andy.
Oh, fuck. Pardon my French.
Jeez, bud. You just got off the wagon since you had your second kid here.
Oh, yeah. I'm way off the wagon today.
Right, like you were ragging on me last night. You're making it personal.
Yeah, I apologize.
Making my picks for me, like it. I mean,
all the estrogen's building up inside of me being around.
That's what it is, because land does the same thing. This is what it's all making sense now. You're becoming a woman.
Mm-hmm.
You're Andrea.
Oh, great. We got Shekin and Andrea. I might as well just change my name on here now.
Oh, we got Alex's wife in here, Bethany, who I call Mom. She says that Alex is in a rare mood tonight, so watch out.
Great.
Oh Lord, we're screwed.
It should just be Tuesday night shenanigans with fishing talk mixed in.
I mean, it hasn't really been fishing talk lately. It's just been a lot of shenanigans, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of shenanigans, let's get him in here. Mr. Alex Rudd. What's going on, pal? Yep, here we go.
Howdy, let's get ruddy. Like, is that what we're doing?
Dude, I'm excited. I'm so glad to be here. I love you guys so much.
You drunk?
No, it's just been a minute since I've been able to talk just like fishing with somebody. And it's like, so my podcast for the past probably like 4 weeks has been very serious conservation talk. Like, and I've had some really good guests on. That's Steve Barden, Gene Gilliland, Shan McGorm. I mean, like, dude, fantastic conversations. But I'm like just biting at the bit to do like an underrated, overrated, and just like crap all over Morgan Wallen or something. Like, I just like, I'm ready to talk, but I know we've got like a focus tonight that we need to focus on. So we're going to focus on that, but I can't make any promises at what point, this thing will totally derail and we'll go off the rails. And I'm waiting for
right now. We'll start right now. Morgan Wallen talk. Did you see John King's post about Morgan Wallen playing in Kentucky? And he's like for the entire day, he like posted about like doing stuff that he'd rather be doing than going to a Morgan Wallen concert. It was kind of funny.
I love it. I love it. Dude, listen, Morgan Wallen is just, I ain't got nothing for that old boy. And he's probably like, the thing is, he's a buddy of his, like follows me on Instagram or something. So I know at some point or another, I'm probably going to have like Morgan Wallen fangirls all over me hating me. But like, he's just it's just like a redneck and he's just talking redneck. I mean, you know, I don't know. Anyway. Damn my ears. I'm sorry, JP.
There's people saying, I wish Alex was on last night's show. You would have thoroughly enjoyed Deacon saying, I'm getting pulled over, boys. I got to go.
Keep filming him. Keep filming him.
I wish he left it on. That would have been incredible. But yeah, dude, I mean, every time we get you on, it's always a happy mix of like shenanigans. And then we actually drop some like legitimate knowledge, which we're going to talk about river fishing in the spring, because outside of the Niagara River, I mean, we don't really have like an actual river unless we go down like the Susky or something like that, or the Allegheny, which I don't think Andy even has fish of existence in it. But like, we don't have much. I'm saying like you have rivers all over the place that you can go and fish, or creeks, things of that nature. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, dude, it's the whole lifeblood of what we've got going on around here. I mean, it's the Tennessee River and every little creek and tributary that feeds into it. And if it's not moving water, then I don't know. It just sucks.
It just sucks.
So, yeah, we like moving water down here.
Yeah, but the only moving water that we're used to is like a natural lake current and like wind driven for the most part. Great Lakes to an extent have, you know, a natural current flow, obviously. But like when it comes to river fishing in the spring, it's to me, I understand how lakes set up. And in regards to where these fish come out of, you know, out of the wintering holes and move up into staging and then go to spawn and all that jazz. For the most part, I understand that. But from a river standpoint, it's like you always hear current is the ultimate negator. Yep. And it's like when there's no ice to be had, you know, where do these fish from the wintering hole? Like when you go and start fishing in the spring, where do you go start looking when it comes to this? Are you fishing the same stuff that you fish in the summer? Or is it a completely different outlook when you go and launch your kayak or boat?
So let's specify here a little bit so I can understand and help to maybe break this question down in several different ways. Are we talking about like dam discharge fishing where you've got artificial current in a river, or are we talking about a naturally flowing river like out of a mountain?
Well, let's go natural, because I think that'll apply to the majority of folks.
Okay, so that's something that this time of year, I mean, I've already kind of started getting back into that style of fishing. Those types of rivers and creeks and that kind of those naturally flowing rivers, it is amazing how they act almost exactly like a lake will act. And in the fact that you've got fish that want to live in the deepest water possible. And sometimes that's 8 feet. Sometimes that's 15 feet. You know, it just depends on how the river sets up. But then they'll also want to move up shallow and they'll want to eat and they'll want to focus on bait fish. And that's usually in that, 0 to 10 foot of water range. And then they're going to want to spawn and they're going to want to look for the same exact things that they want to look for to spawn in the river. Now, all that being said, your biggest factor that's going to play there is the current itself, is how is the current affecting all of those things? And, it's kind of complicated process to learn, but once you kind of get a good grasp on it, you start to understand how the river sets up and how fish use that current to live. And Andrew, you probably know all about this fishing steelhead. I mean, when you look at a river, if you've got a big boulder in the middle of the river, that boulder is going to create a current break, and then there's going to be an eddy behind that current break. That's a natural thing for that fish to sit up on that river to do everything that we just said that it wants to do. It's usually a little bit deeper water behind that thing. It allows them to ambush and to eat. And then it's also a great place for them to spawn as well. And so, when I'm looking at a natural river, man, I'm really kind of, especially when we're coming out of the winter into the spring, I'm looking for those natural transitional areas where they can have access to deeper water. And deep is very relative when we're talking about rivers, because we can be in a situation where you're dealing with inches that turn into a couple feet, or we can talk about where we're talking a couple feet turns into 8 or 10 feet, or even 20 feet even. And so, just look for those natural areas where you've got that transition where they can go from deep to shallow as quickly as they want to. Because in the spring, what do we often have? We have these giant, temperature swings.
Mhm.
Just this past weekend, it went from 78 on Friday to 29 or 39 on Saturday morning. So, those fish went from we're ready to make babies to we're going to be in 25 foot of water again. And so just those river fish act exactly the same way. And so just look for those kind of transitional areas and then start to learn to read the current, because that's one thing that a natural current, naturally flowing river or creek versus a river or a dam driven river or creek, where it's kind of applicable to both, but that naturally flowing creek is going to set up completely different. Because the thing about a naturally flowing creek is, guess what it's done since the literal beginning of time? It's naturally flowed that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's going to be these consistencies in those creeks and in those rivers that you can go year after year after year after year, and there's going to be a fish sitting there year after year after year after year. Because even if it gets killed or you take it out of there or whatever it is, there's going to be another one that just goes right up into its place. And so that's kind of almost I love about naturally flowing rivers is fish in naturally flowing rivers act like y'all's fish do, those northern fish, where they do the things that they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they have a system of which they go through things. It's like when the water hits this temperature, they move up and they spawn, then they sit here and they eat and they do all these things. Whereas when you get into those artificially driven rivers that are, powered by dams, when the current's not on, dude, it's a crapshoot as to where they're going, why they're going there, or what's going on. Now, when the water's flowing, then you get some more of those consistencies. But even then, things can vastly change from day to day, hour to hour, week to week. I mean, hour to hour, even. Like if it goes from 86,000 units coming out of a dam to 80,000, it can totally shift where those fish are at. And so the naturally flowing rivers, I always say if you're looking to get into like that creek fishing, river fishing kind of deal, the kind of stuff I like to do is naturally flowing rivers. Pick a few rivers, learn them really, really well, and then pick a few more rivers and learn them really, really well. Because there's going to be these consistencies through each one of them that make it where it's almost easy to go catch fish, because you're like, well, that rock had a 4-pound smallmouth behind it last year. And most likely there will be another smallmouth just the same size sitting behind that same exact rock this year.
Probably the same fish, honestly.
Exactly. I mean, they are it's almost routine. I mean, like I have seen the same fish sitting in the same spot, and I know it's the same fish because it's got a little spot on its tail. And I'm like, how does that fish know to stay there? But they do. They just live there, and that's like their little area that they live until they die and drift away,
And that brings up a question we got in the comments from Brad here saying, will river bass stay in one area or travel up and down throughout the year? And he's referring to a natural river.
They will move. Now, that is something I have seen. It's kind of depending on here. The two things that it depends on is the temperature. How hot is it outside? And then the amount of rain that we've had, because the amount of rain is definitely going to change the dichotomy of that river. And so what I've seen is like, if we get a ton of rain, you get a massive inflow of dirty water, the water levels rise up. Essentially what the fish do is what they do in a lake. They get up on the bank and they just hide behind something until everything regulates, and then they go get back in their little areas. The second thing is that temperature. And what I've seen is, and this is definitely true with spotted bass for some reason, largemouth, smallmouth, they kind of they don't move as much, but the spots are weird. When it gets really, really warm outside, they will go and they will find the fastest moving water that they can get in, wherever the most oxygen is and wherever you're going to get the most movement in that water. And I think that primarily has to do with the fact it's the oxygen, the food's being brought to them, but then that water is usually overall a little bit cooler because it's got that turbulence in it. It's got that air exposure, it's got that movement. And that water, I've seen where I can be 10 yards from where the water's flowing and it's 78, and then you get right to where the water's flowing and it's 72, and it's just enough that it makes those fish want to sit there. And so yes, they will move, but if you've got like some of these rivers that I go to, literally it doesn't matter if it's December or if it's July, it's like 65 degrees, and it's because they're mountain springs with groundwater coming out of them. and it's a lot of groundwater flowing into them. You know, you got your big primary spring that flows the whole entire river, but then it's got a bunch of groundwater flowing into it. They'll stay consistent temperatures all year long, and those fish, unless you get a massive influx of water in there to muddy it up, to dirty up siltation, they're going to hang out because it's so consistent all year long.
Andy, what do you think from your experience with Niagara River? Do you kind of see the same thing?
Yeah, I think smallmouth in river systems are very silical. Like, if there's deep water access to a spawning flat, like you can follow them from winter. They're deep. As soon as water hits like 42 degrees, they slide up on the flat. They stay there till it's like 65 and they spawn. Then they drop back out, and they might spread out a little bit more in the summer because they're looking for food to eat. And at that point, they might decimate an area of gobies. And if there's shad, river systems tend to have more bait in them, in my opinion. So the fish have more food and more opportunities to roam around. But personally speaking, like, they live in the same areas. Like, if you know where a smallmouth lives on a river, natural or a big glacier river like the Niagara River is from the Great Lakes, I mean, I've got spots in the Niagara River that I can go 100 yards from the spawning flat to 30 foot of water and catch them in the summer, winter, fall in like 100-yard stretch. Yeah. And they're the same fish every year. You can like, oh yeah, I caught you last year.
They're extremely consistent. I mean, and it's fascinating to me how current makes fish so consistent, because even in some of those artificial systems, I'll never forget this. This is one of the damnedest things that I'll ever see in my life. My dad caught the same exact largemouth in the same exact spot on the same exact bait 6 different weeks in a row.
What?
Sounds about
No
right.
joke.
Current fish is the ultimate negator. They'll constantly eat.
As long as the current was flowing and the certain amount was coming out of the dam, this fish would set up on this grass flat the same exact way every single time. And after a while, I started to want to figure out, like, why is it there? What is holding that fish there? Well, the water got drawn down. I just pulled up there on the flat. There was like an old dock that was in the water, and we couldn't see it. And it was 2 like 4x4s in a V setting. And that fish sat there and just would move up to that same. When the current got a certain way, that fish would just move right up behind that thing and sit there. And you could drag a freaking, it was a magnum worm, it was a Strike King bullworm. Take a Strike King bullworm and drag it behind that thing. And I mean, dude, every single time in almost the same exact spot, dink and hook it. And the reason we knew, I have a picture of the fish somewhere. The reason we knew it was a fish is it had a split in its tail. And he caught that fish 6 different times.
That's incredible.
This is my home.
Yeah. He's like, this is my worm. Yeah, it's my spot. Ain't nobody coming in it. Yeah, I mean, like, dude, that's how consistent that they can be. It's how resident that they can be. And that's the thing about when you're fishing a river, you're fishing, especially a natural river, you're dealing with, for the most part, residential fish that are going to be resident there from the day that they're born till the day something takes them out or they die. And you know, I've seen the same exact bass swimming in the same exact areas, especially in some of these real clear, like, rivers and creeks that I like to go fish in the kayak. I'll take it and drop it in, and it's like, man, I've caught, and muskies are another great example. I've caught the same muskie 3 or 4 times, and it's just because they don't really have anywhere to go either. That's a whole nother thing about a river, that, yeah, they can swim down or they can swim up, but if there's something blocking their way down or blocking their way up, they have this area to live in. And so they can move within their area a little bit. You know, there'll be inconsistencies where there'll be 10 yards one direction or 10 yards the other direction. But if it consistently stays the same temperature with the same amount of water flowing through, and they're just going to chill in that one spot because they have no reason to move, because food's being brought to their face and they can just, you know, lash out and eat it when they need to. And then they just sit back down on their little couch and wait till something else comes to their face.
Yeah. Well, so like for lakes, when it comes to spawning fish, and you guys mentioned this in a river system, like on a lake, you have flats, or you have these coves in regards to like largemouth, these back cuts where they can go and they do their deed. But like, people think river fishing, there's current, you don't, obviously there's your eddies, of course, that'll be your prime answer. But I mean, what other locations do these fish have to spawn in the river?
You would be amazed how a fish will spawn just smack in the middle of the river. Like it's kind of crazy. Like I really didn't understand how what's the word I'm looking for? Like how I guess like inventive a fish will get in where they'll spawn.
Hmm.
On tops of rocks, the backsides of rocks, dock post. I mean, anything that's hard that creates just enough of an eddy, and I know that's the word we wanted to avoid, but like just enough of a current break that they can put their eggs there, they're going to do it. I mean, prime example is, and I told Bailey, I think I was texting you about this. I saw a ginormous spot on a bed in a creek that I was fishing the other day. And what was crazy is it was just smack in the middle of the creek, but there was just two rocks right like beside each other. And imagine a set of boobs, people. And they were right where the boobs come down to the chest. And like it was just, but these rocks, these weren't ginormous rocks. These were probably like 6-inch diameter rocks. And you had literally a 7-pound spot sitting there depositing her eggs in this little bitty spot. And it was just enough of a current break, just enough of what she was looking for with that kind of sandy bottom in between there. And she deposited her eggs there. And I'm sure she's still either there or moved on now. And so it's you almost would be amazed how inventive they'll get, or how in our minds we look at something, we go, nothing could spawn here. But in their little, instinctual driven minds of this is all they're made to do is eat, eat and make babies and survive. They can find the littlest little differentiation on the bottom and they'll put eggs there.
Yeah.
Well, and that's something to talk about river current too, is a lot of times what you see on the surface is not the true current of the river a foot below.
Yes.
So
more that meets the eye.
Yeah, like you can literally stand in a river and it's pushing at your knees, but your feet don't move because you have more surface current than current on the bottom. So if you can understand why your current is quicker on top and not on the bottom, you can actually set yourself up really good in river systems as well, because those fish will hang in the craziest current you think that they're in, but they have this soft belly underneath. I've seen fish spawn and stuff like that in a couple of creeks around here. It's like, what are you doing there? And then you're like, oh, there's like no current.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is fascinating because like fishing below a dam discharge, especially because that's artificial. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of water being pushed through this dam. And so weird things happen with the current that you don't see in natural rivers, but they do happen in natural rivers too. But like one thing that I've seen is where you'll throw a jig in there and the current is jerking down river, but when the jig gets to a certain depth, it starts going back up river. And like it's those little things, those little differentiations that you look for. And we were going to get into this when we got into dam discharge fishing, where it's just honestly, it's time on the water. Like, and there's like little weird things that like Caleb Bell, our good buddy, Mr. Vasquez, like he showed me before where he's like, all right, so you see this? So you see how it's flowing down like that? He said, but when you throw your scrounger in there, it's going to start going back up river when it gets to 10 foot of water. And it's like the only way that he knows that is just, guess what? He's throwing a scrounger in there and it's going back up river, And so it's like, it's just, screen time, a lot of people say with electronics. Well, with shallow water current fishing, it's literally just about going out there and throwing stuff in different areas and seeing how things work and putting the time in of physically, actually doing that makes it work for you.
Yeah.
Andrew's right, dude. That was one thing I didn't even think about until you brought it up, is how crazy current can be. I mean, I got a video I've got on Instagram, and it's I throw a plopper, and you see the waterfall, and I'm rolling the plopper, and the plopper's going right, but the waterfall is flowing straight at me, and it's just this weird, like, little current seam and this little current differentiation that you can't see with the naked eye, but it's what's actually pulling and how the current's actually pulling. And when it gets to a certain point, a smallmouth comes up and crushes it, and you just got to throw it in there and figure out kind of what it's doing to get them to do that.
Yeah, I remember a specific time with Caleb when he took Zach Hall and I out, and he didn't say anything about it. And there's times, like especially when you're at tail races, where it's like you can tell obviously the current's flowing one direction, but you can't always see. Like Andy said that, like you can't always see with the naked eye what's going on below the surface. And we're throwing big plugs, and it's like we're going with the current, and the next thing you know, I lean in thinking I have a fish, but it's the current going the other way that's pushing against it, like taking it up. And it was like, it goes, oh yeah, current's going the other way once you hit bottom in like this direction or like this amount of feet away. it was kind of just like mind blowing just to some kid who's only ever fished the Finger Lakes.
Yeah, and we can make it even more complex on you. Like when you add a curve into a natural current river, like a river system.
Yep.
Oh my gosh! Like a lot of times you'll have when you have a big bend in a river system, the outside is where the current will flow harder. But if you have like a weird, obscene obstruction slightly above it, you'll get to the next bend. It's just slightly different. All of a sudden, you have fast current on the inside, and you're like, what the hell? But you throw your cast in there and it's going back upstream, and the smallmouth are at the head of it in the very tail and not in the belly at all. Like,
And to go back, I know we're talking about spring, but to go back to my winter fishing this year, caught a ton of fish on the money badger. One thing that I didn't really expand on a whole lot because it is a complicated kind of idea is what Andrew just said, where like when you're dealing with a river system and current is king, and let's say we're not below the discharge, let's say we're above the discharge and we've got that natural pull that's creating current in this river system. I'm looking for outside bends and inside bends in these rivers because they create just areas for fish where they don't have to work. They literally get behind a tree limb and they sit there and they let things come to their face and they kill it and they eat it. And fish are lazy. And that's the one thing about rivers that's awesome too, is it allows a fish, even though they do move and they are moving around, it allows them to be lazy in many, many ways. And so like when you're looking at a river or a creek or anything like that, even if it's man-made or if it's natural, whatever it is, anywhere that you've got a bend in that river, really kind of invest in that area and figure that area out, because there's either going to be a bite on the outside bend or the inside bend. And normally for me, in this the way these lakes set up, it's in those big outside bends. It's where you've got the current coming down, it's going to bend out, and wherever that current dumps into, those fish are going to want to sit there and they're going to just be there eating. And you can get a lot of bites really, really quickly in those areas. And it happens in the spring too. It's just,
now, let me ask you this question with an outside bend. Do you notice that if there's additional structure in the outside bend that's creating more current breaks as that current's flowing, do you get more bites or do you get bit better in a big wide open bend?
It depends on the body of water and how it sets up. Now that being said, what I've found is they're normally deeper, which it gives you deeper water access more quickly. And so you get a lot more vertical kind of structure. You get kind of more of that stair step effect. And now I'm dealing with a lot of lakes where sandstone and limestone are your main, bases for what, the mountains are setting on. And so the erosion over time of that river pounding on that has created like these weird kind of stair steps and things. But it just depends on how it's going to set up. But I think it more than anything, it's just that natural erosion process over time that's created that little bit deeper water that allows those fish to have deep water access. And it's the same thing with these natural rivers too. Instead of finding like these big limestone and sandstone rock ledges that I like to focus on to get those fish to eat. And that's a bite. I mean, that can be spring, summer, winter. I mean, it doesn't matter. Those fish live there. That's their resident fish. But like when you're dealing with a creek, what you'll find is you'll find a bend. You'll find that more deeper kind of bluffed out stuff, but then you'll also normally find a deep pool. And those deep pools are going to hold fish, period, all the time. And you can I've sit in a deep pool in a river in a kayak and literally caught 20 fish out of one deep pool because they just get flushed in there. They congregate there. There's bait fish there. Everything that they need is right there. And it's almost like taking the macro, which is the whole river, and turn it into this micro little biome where this fish literally never has to leave because it doesn't matter how hard the current flows, how much water, how much siltation, what's going on. That fish can go and just slip off into that deep water and just sit there and chill. And it's always a natural eddy. It's always a natural spot that they can just chill and live there.
For Dustin's question there, I'd say it's probably the most high percentage spot of the hole because those are the fish that are going to be feeding first at the head of the hole as like your current flows into that bend. The ones that are always up in the current are the ones that are proactively feeding. If you start getting to the fish in the tail end of the current, they're usually more lazy in a more relaxed setting, and you actually have to trick those ones a little bit more, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a river around here that I really enjoy fishing, and what's funny is that exactly what Andrew said happens. Is like you can catch the first like 12 on a buzzbait right at the beginning of the hole, but at the back of the hole where you start to slow down, you need to slow down. You start dragging a Ned rig and then you catch those fish, but they'll just follow a buzzbait. But the ones right at the beginning where that current's pushing in, they're like, I want to kill everything that gets near me. And so like they're just more aggressive. And I don't know if this is true or not, and I would have to ask a biologist, but I believe there's something about a certain amount of oxygen and a fish having a certain amount of oxygen in their system that just makes them more pissed off. Because like fish who live in that current, who are living in that moving water where they're getting a fresh flow of oxygen into their face all the time, it's like they are more apt to eat something aggressive and moving than any other fish that I've dealt with.
I think it's more metabolism based because they're burning more calories. They need to be more efficient. They're more streamlined too. Like if you catch a smallmouth out in a lake, they tend to be more round and bulbous. If you catch a river fish, they're like darts with big tails, big fins for balance. So I love river fish.
So rabbit hole real quick, but you'll find this fascinating. I was listening to an audiobook the other day, Steve Rinella. It's called American Buffalo. And he said that from the time that humans started interacting with buffalo to the time that they were almost extirpated from North America by the Europeans, that the buffalo's head structure changed to make them more efficient at running rather than standing and fighting, because their entire existence up to that point, like if a bear or an American lion walked up to them, they'd just get in a circle and they'd fight them because that's how they defended themselves. Well, then when the people came that could throw spears and shoot them with guns came, it made them where they couldn't stand and fight anymore. They had to run away because if they did stand and fight, it was just a slaughter fest. And so I'm tying this all back into the bass fishing thing because like it made me think, man, that is a perfect explanation as to how quickly a fish can modify its body or adapt to its surroundings to the point where it totally changes how it interacts with its environment. And Andrew, like you said, these river fish, and this, you'll notice this the more you fish rivers, you're dealing with smallmouth and spots and largemouth. Like river largemouth, I can look at a largemouth and go, that came from a river. They've got these ginormous, like heart-shaped tails. They literally are big and just like heart-shaped. Their tails and the bases of their tails are huge, and they just are built differently because their efficiency level depends on how they're built. And I think those are genetic things that are all passed down year after year after year. But it's just a fascinating thought that we as humans can have that effect on fish and effect on animals, and their environment does the same thing. And so I think you're right. I think the metabolism thing, I've never really considered that. It's probably exactly what it is. They're just a little more amped. They're a little more pissed than the rest of the fish are.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you think about it from a perspective standpoint. Like Andy, you mentioned like the lake fish, how and certain times, like you've already experienced it this year, where things can get tough. It's like the fish that are on the lake are like your fat guy sitting on a couch eating chips. It's not going to get up unless he's really got to. But he's like, oh, look, a bag of chips magically appears right in the couch. Whereas like the people that are out active every day working out are eating more actively because they need more calories throughout the day. So it's like, yeah, I think your point makes a lot of sense. Were you playing music, bro?
I was liking your post on Instagram and it played music at me. What song was that? Because that was
yeah. So
damn,
like, I think the biggest like benefactor to the metabolism though is 100% water temperature based. So for instance, I fish for steelhead from end of October through April and guide for them. When it gets to be 33-degree water temp, a steelhead, for as big and marvelous that they are of a fish, right, a giant rainbow trout, they only have to eat once every 26 days when the water gets cold for how big they are. So like you'll catch steelhead, if you cut them open in the wintertime, you'll notice that their bellies are empty. And a lot of times you probably catch a lot of winter smallmouth in these rivers that 65 degrees, but if it's cold out there, they're probably their metabolism slowing down. They're probably more slender, and if they are chunky, a lot of times that's their eggs because they start making their eggs in the fall.
It's interesting. Well, I mean, if you look at the bass fishing, and we need to revisit this topic in like August because river fishing in August is just bonkers. And it's because it's like every fish in that river, it's like, I guess, the temperature gets to a certain point where they're like, I want to kill everything. And it's like, dude, it doesn't matter. I mean, like, there's rivers around here that literally I can take a buzzbait and some extra plastics for a trailer and just go. And like, they're so aggressive. Every single fish is choking it to the back of their throat, and they're just in a mood. And I think, again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, those consistencies. They can consistently stay in the same spots, have food brought to them, blah, 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 blah. But when that temperature gets right, they're just like, okay, it's time to be a murder machine. And they just start murdering everything. And it's awesome. That's the way we can.
I like it.
Yeah. So when it comes to a natural river, a river that's always flowing and doesn't change too much year after year, I feel like for someone that's trying to go and learn it, it's a easier learning curve because you don't have, we're in the dam systems where they go, oh, we're going to turn the water off now. Hey, we're going to rise it 10 feet. Oh, we're going to sink. We're going to, drop it 10 feet, or it's much, much easier to learn. How does this compare to that of a dam driven river system?
So the naturally flowing river, yes, is going to be a heck of a lot more easier than your dam driven system. Now, your dam driven system is all dependent on a human. And so, the main thing about, especially the TVA dams, so I'm talking specifically about TVA dams, Tennessee Valley Authority. They control every dam on the Tennessee River system until it flows into the Mississippi River. And so I'll give the little thing because I always love to say it. You've got Douglas and Cherokee and Norris that all flow eventually into one of the Tennessee River system lakes. But Loudon is your headwaters of the Tennessee River system. Loudon goes into Watts Bar into Chickamauga, Chickamauga into Nickajack, Nickajack into Guntersville, Guntersville into Pickwick, Pickwick into Wilson, Wilson into Wheeler, Wheeler into the Toms Bigsby Waterway, Toms Bigsby into the Kentucky Lake, and Kentucky Lake eventually goes in the Mississippi River. I may have missed something there, but that's how it goes. And so you got to imagine all of those lakes are controlled by a dam that's owned by the TVA. The TVA is the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is a federal government entity that runs all those dams. Their main concern is not fishing or the fishermen. Their main concern is flood control and hydroelectrical production.
And screwing over tournament fishermen.
And screwing over everybody. and
killing all the weeds.
And killing everything. But you're right. I mean, they don't care about us as anglers, but we do get the benefit on the back end of when they are, pulling water through these dams, or they're, we've had a bunch of water and the dams start to spill, which is essentially where they just open the gates enough and the water spills over the top. You get this artificial current. That artificial current is going to change the total dichotomy of some of these lakes. And the whole money badger bite that I got on this year with the crankbait, it had everything to do with the fact that we had a ton of rain moving in, and that lake that I was fishing on is a pass-through lake between two bigger lakes. And so there's a ton of current being jerked through there. But here's the deal. If I went out there on a day that they didn't have the dams open and they weren't pulling current, guess what the fish didn't do? They didn't bite. They didn't eat. So it totally changes that fish. And this is kind of going back to that buffalo thing that I was talking about. I was going to tie it in right here, is that we have created a system where we literally can change the entire way that a fish interacts with its environment. And so when they turn these dams on, you've got a bunch of current moving out of here. These fish will move up shallow. They'll start to use the things in those rivers like they would use in a natural river, but it's all dependent on what the humans that are running those dams, or what factors are playing into what those humans' decision-making processes are, whether those fish eat or not. Same general idea of what we've been talking about here with how a natural river sets up versus an artificial river, but it all has to do with the fact of whether you have that current or not. Now, those fish are catchable without that current, but it's really, really, really tough. Like, it totally changes how they interact, what they do, and some of them just won't eat. Like, that is the main driving factor that makes them want to eat, is the current starts flowing, they move up shallow. And what happens is as that current gets flowing and as the water starts to rise, naturally, the bait fish and all that other stuff is going to come up with it. It gets the bait fish turned up. It gets those fish's feeding instincts going on. And so if those things aren't happening, the fish are just like it's like a shark to a chum line. Like if it ain't there, they're not coming to it. It's got to be there for that shark to go, hey, it's time to eat. Those bass can be the same exact way.
Yeah. I feel like this one is so difficult, and why I think another reason why a lot of folks like look at Chickamauga or something like that and forget that it's a river system.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's a giant river, man. I mean, like, and that's, dude, Chick is a perfect example of a lake that if you don't have current, you're not catching fish. They are so current driven. I mean, they love in the morning. Great example. I'll go back to this. When we were fishing the Hobie on Chickamauga, I went up the second day. I swung for the fences and went frog fishing. That morning, they started pulling water from Chickamauga Dam into Nickajack. I had where these dams are so big and they can move so much water. I had an artificial current that was coming out of this slough. I caught frogfish until they turned that dam generator off, and there was no more current coming through there. And those frogfish, poof, disappeared. I didn't get a bite the rest of the day. It had nothing to do with the shad. It had nothing to do with anything other than the current positioned those fish, and those fish ate. And then once the current was gone, the bite disappeared with it. And it's just like it is amazing. And I try to explain that to people around here and people who don't live around here. I'm like, you guys don't understand. Current is king around here. If we don't have current in a lot of situations, we don't have fish. And one thing that happens, and we'll expand out to a lake level here. And I've seen this happen on the graph and on my electronics. There's a couple spots on a couple lakes around here that, there's rock piles that are the size of the hood of a truck. When there's no current, those fish will be spread out in an area the size of a football field. So you have the same amount of fish that are as catchable as they are when they're on the rock pile, but with no current, they're spread out to the size of a football field. So it's like trying to, hit bowling pins with a bowling ball, throwing it, into a football field. Yeah, you may hit one or two, but you got to get kind of lucky. When they turn that current on, they all right to that one rock pile. And so you've taken 20 fish that were all spread out over a football field, and you've put them in right on the 50-yard line. And then you go and take your bowling ball and try to hit one of them. It's going to be a heck of a lot easier. And then plus the current adds that extra level of they're a little bit more tuned up. The water's moving. They have to look in a direction. They're getting bait fish brought to them, and then they turn on and they want to eat. And that dam discharge fishing is the same exact way. So you've got the same amount of fish living in the same area, but instead of being on one particular rock pile, one particular, barge tie up or whatever it is, one current break, when the dam water's on, they're spread out all over the place, and it's just a heck of a lot harder to catch them. And so that's kind of the way to almost think about that and how current affects those fish is not only do they feed on the current and feed because of the current, but then the current also makes them isolate to smaller areas, which we all know the way that you catch fish is present them with something, and knowing where they're sitting and why they're sitting there because of the current can allow you to present them with something, and then they're going to eat.
So for somebody that is fishing this style of river that's dam driven, they turn it off. What is your first move when it gets turned off? Besides leave.
Follow the current down, because you're gonna have it's not like it's just gonna like disappear. You can actually follow current down, and that's something that we do a lot around here. Is like you got to imagine something in motion stays in motion until it gets stopped. You know what I mean? And water's the same exact way. And so it's an interesting thing that we'll do, especially in some of the rivers. Like, we jet boat fish in the summer. I got a couple guys that have jet boats I go fishing with. And what's amazing is we'll run up when the current's cranking in the morning, and then they'll turn the current off, and we follow the current all the way down because the fish are going to be eating with that current all the way down. So that's one thing you can do. Mm-hmm. So that's an option. So if you're in a river, you're floating in a kayak, you're fishing a jet boat, or you're fishing an aluminum boat, or even a glass boat, because there are certain areas you can do that too. You just follow that current down and stay with that bite until the current hits an area big enough that it disperses and you lose that kind of concentrated current. Because that's a whole other factor I guess we didn't address. These rivers, a lot of these dam-driven rivers, where the dams actually discharge out into are constricted areas. And so, like, Chickamauga Dam is enormous. But in comparison to the vastness that is main Lake Nickajack, it isn't as constrained as Chickamauga Dam is. And so the dam where the water is actually flowing out into is only as big of an area as the dam is wide. And so you got to kind of figure out what that looks like. Pickwick's different. Like Pickwick's massive. And so like when they turn the dams off there, like it has enough area that it disperses and the current just goes away. Whereas like, some of these other lakes, you've got this narrow enough area for a long enough period that you can follow that current and go with it and catch fish. Now, if you can't follow the current or it does disperse into a big area enough that the current just dissipates and goes away, I'm going to pull off to the first kind of natural stopping point that those fish would want to move to if they're moving down. Because a lot of times when you got a lot of current, fish move up, they get shallow, they're easy to catch. You can throw big 6-inch swim baits on 3/4 ounce heads and crankbaits and stuff like that, and they just smash them. But when that current goes down, literally, a lot of the times the water level will physically drop because you don't have as much volume pushing into a small area. And so when you don't have that volume of water, it's just like you put ice cubes or whatever in a cup, the water rises up. And it's like this, it's just that volume makes the water rise. And so the water will physically drop. And so you just kind of got to know the river. Again, that's putting in the reps out there. But find that first natural stopping point that those fish are going to want to go to. It can be a barge tie up. It can be just a drop in the river. It can be a small ledge. It can be just anything where those fish will kind of naturally move to and pick up something slow. Start flipping a jig, throwing a Ned rig, throwing a wacky rig. I mean, those things are the things that I've had a ton of success with, especially below some of these dams up here. What you'll find is the way that they were designed, and they were designed. A lot of them aren't naturally made like this. People will go in and they put a giant dam in, and they'll just totally change the bottom structure. They'll dredge and they'll get it where that it can handle that volume of water that's going to be dumped into it when the dams are open. And what they usually do, it's like these like almost stair steps down to the bottom where they dredge it out. And I don't know why they do it. It must have something to do with the engineering of being able to handle that much water. But those stair steps create a natural place for those fish to just pull off to. And so when that water drops 2-3 feet, they're just going to go that first kind of stair step in 8 to 10 foot of water. You throw a Ned rig there and drag it in front of their face and kind of slow down and really start to pick a lot of that apart. They'll eat it because they're still kind of pissed off and they're still smallmouth and spots and largemouth. And they're still going to eat and do their thing. It's just you've got to change. The best way I can put this, if the water's fast and aggressive, fish it fast and aggressive. If the water's slowed down to almost nothing, you've got to slow down to almost nothing. And that's kind of how you've got to approach thinking about that water and how that water affects those fish.
That's a great way to put it. And that's a great question here. Is we had a little bit earlier, but asking what your favorite baits are for rivers. So if you could say two for when the water's moving and 2 for when the water ain't.
So when the water is like really cracking and, especially this time of year, if you've got big forage in your lakes, throw bigger swim baits. Like, we got a lot of not threadfin, but gizzard shad, a lot of big bluegill. One of my favorite things is like 5 to 6 inch hollow belly swim bait. Something like, I don't know, what is Berkeley's? Berkeley's called the Power Swimmer, right?
Nah, that's just their swim bait. Theirs is literally called the hollow belly.
Okay, the like a hollow belly, like the Bass Tricks, the Zoo. I think Zoom makes one that I love. That's the one like that before. Yeah, dude, and you can't find them anymore. I literally have like 6 packs of them out there, and I will fight somebody. I will fight my own grandma for those things.
Yeah.
Like
they only had them out for like 2 years, didn't they? And they just disappeared
they disappeared. And they are the perfect swim bait. It's like a 5-inch. It's really 6, but they label it as a 5-inch hollow belly swim bait. And so I like that on like a 1/2 ounce to 3/4 ounce head, depending on how aggressive the current is. And then a crankbait, like a small body, medium diving crankbait, money badger, bandit, spro rock crawler. I mean, any of those kind of crankbaits, dude. I mean, the more aggressive you can be, because that's the thing is like, I've taken people to do the dam discharge fishing thing. And this is dam discharge specifically. I want to get into kind of more naturally flowing river baits here in just a second. Dam discharge specifically, there's often times that they're pushing out 88 to 90,000 cubic feet of water per second. That means that you could probably not touch your trolling motor and be going 5 miles an hour down current. Like you are moving. And so like you're throwing these baits in there and I mean just reeling them as fast as you can, trying to keep up with it. And you would be amazed how a smallmouth can hit something moving that fast. But then there's the added factor too. There's always probably a back eddy there too. So you feel like you're fishing super fast, but realistically, you've got a bait kind of hanging in the strike zone for a long time and it gives a fish a chance to eat it. Same thing with the crankbait. Now, when the current gets turned off and it rips down to nothing, I'm going to pick up a Ned rig first. I've just had a ton of success fishing a Ned rig, like 3/16 ounce head, maybe even a little bit bigger head, and just dragging it super slow, and representing something like a crawdad and all that. Because you'd be amazed too how many crawdads will live in that quick of a current. And I think when the current actually gets turned down, the crawdads are more apt to kind of come out and be like, hey, we can actually do something now. Whereas when the current gets cranked up, they crawl down on the rocks and they chill until it kind of chills out. And then a jig. I love to flip a jig. Like one of the things around here that we have a lot of are big barge tie-ups, and those barge tie-ups will be like consecutive, like beside each other. They stack them up, and there's like these little seams in those barge tie-ups, and they're like shaped like this, and they go all the way to the bottom. And both when the current's cranking and when the current's not cranking, the fish love to sit on those seams, and they'll suspend all up and down those seams. So you take a 1/2 ounce jig and literally throw it in there and just start feeding it line. And then just watch it sink. And like sometimes you got to sink it all the way to the bottom and they'll be sitting there and they'll eat it, or they'll hit it somewhere down the wall. You just watch your line and you can catch one. And it's just it's a natural thing or a man-made thing that those fish like to sit on because bait fish is brought there. There's usually an eddy in those little creases. Like you'll have this crease, you have 5 miles an hour current coming out from it, but then there'll just be this swirl in that crease and it just swirls and it's just an easy place for those fish to live and have food brought to them. And so it's the two things that I like. Now, naturally constantly flowing rivers, spinnerbait, like a Chapo, especially when it gets warm enough. I even like and we were talking about this the other day. 6 Cents came out with that line through head with the treble hook through the top.
So like the hangover, I think they're going to call it or whatever.
Yeah. So one thing that I used to do to kind of make that artificially is I would take a paddle tail swim bait, like a Kitech or whatever else, anybody that makes that kind of ribbed swim bait, do the straw trick through the head, run a treble hook out the back and hook it in the back, and then just put like a little Nico weight in the bottom of it where it makes it virtually weightless, but it's just enough weight that you can still cast it and kind of keep it off the bottom. And that's a great bait to use in those situations because what I've found, especially in more shallow rivers, is smallmouth will pin things to the bottom. And so if you're swimming it along, you would be amazed how a 4-pound smallmouth can somehow in 2 foot of water get up over top of something and pin it down. And so you naturally get that treble hook right in the top of their mouth. And it's a great bait. That, or you can just do like a EWG style, like a beast hook with no weight on it. That's another one of my favorite things. And then a Ned rig, man. I mean, like if it for some reason gets tough and it's still a naturally flowing river, the Ned rig is the king. I mean, it's always going to be the king. You just got to pick it up and try it. But those are the things that I definitely are my big focuses is just have something to cover the top that moves quick, have something that covers the center of the column to move quick, and then have something that you can kind of tinker around on the bottom in a natural flowing river. And it doesn't take much to catch those fish, man. They're not crazy. I mean, you've been to the Susky. There's I think they're coming for me. Do you hear? Yep.
Bethany called.
They called it. It's a 5150. But anyway, where's that dude going?
Oh, it stopped.
He stopped right here at my house. It's definitely a 5150. But like you've seen on the Susquehanna is a perfect example of a river that's just like, dude, they're not that hard to catch. It's just, there's some super specific things that you can kind of get on, like
a bug.
Yeah, Ewing did, like this weird thing. But for the most part, a buzz bait or a Chapo, a swim bait or a spinner bait, and a Ned rig, and like one of those three things are going to bite them. And it's just because the world that they live in, they're hungry and pissed off all the time.
You got a comment saying 2 nights in a row, cops are involved.
Free Sarah.
Here's the thing. He didn't even have his lights on. That's the weird part.
It is weird. But you said something there that it's going to trigger a tangent here in a second. But you said a beast hook for a bigger swim bait. I had PTSD when you mentioned the beast hook. I think I might be throwing all of mine away after the Harris chain.
Oh, yeah? What happened?
I couldn't stick fish on it.
Really?
And I was told afterwards from people that throw bigger paddle tails with beast hooks to say, yeah, the hook sucks.
That's interesting.
I've all gone to Hayabusa now.
Dude, well, the Hayabusas are really, really good. And the BKKs are good too. I got some of those because they got the little keeper on them. Like you can slide it up under there, it keeps everything together. I don't even know if it's a beast hook. I just know it's like a weightless. And I'm not even talking about like for the river, like the naturally flowing river. I'm talking about like a 4-inch swim bait, like like a power swimmer or whatever, like 4-inch in some sort of shag color, and just a hook big enough for that, you know. But I like the treble hook idea because there's one thing about smallmouth, and the Susquehanna is a great example. On any river that you fish in, what you'll find is they have no place to go other than up. And so they're going to do a lot of up. And so you normally lose fish when they're flying through the air. And like, you know, so that's one thing I like about a treble hook where it separates that bait away from that hook where they have almost zero leverage on you. That's what's going to keep them pinned. And that's why I like that kind of, I don't know, that treble hook idea interests me a whole lot. I'd never seen it anybody. I know you said someone else had done it, but I'd never seen that. So I was just like, oh, that's what I did with a straw and all that. But now I don't have to have a straw. Like it actually works without that.
Have you experimented any with like bull shads or glide baits or anything?
Yeah. So that's something. Never with the bull shad. I've heard a ton of people about the bull shad, like burn and stop with the bull shad. I had a ton of success on it. The glide bait thing is super interesting. It's something that me and John have both kind of got into more. Mag draft and, you know, coal shad kind of bite too. That's a whole nother thing I'm trying to learn right now. I think the coal shad's going to be supreme because it doesn't roll over. Like, so you can fish it in current.
You have to fish it so slow and current.
Yeah.
And it tends to get pushed, you know, like swing on its side.
Yeah. And I've already caught some fish on the coal shad in naturally flowing rivers this year already. And it's been awesome because I can go throw it out there and I'm just like, here she comes, and she's just working right down through there how it's supposed to. But yeah, no, the glide bait is interesting because if you get the right glide bait, and I've not really found the perfect one for this yet. And what Andrew just said is perfect because what'll happen is with a really tall glide bait, it wants to roll over because the current pushes it over. But if you get something, I'm trying to look for something that's kind of, I don't know, slender and more, you know, kind of, I don't know, narrow profile, I guess would be the best way.
You need something that chops more as opposed to walking.
Exactly.
You need to be able to work it quicker.
Exactly. And what you can do is you can get in those current seams and it's like, and just let it like hang there. And then the current will just start taking it down. And dude, that's the most naturally occurring thing that you can imagine. I mean, it looks like a giant piece of dead something floating by their face and they just eat it. So I'm experimenting with it yet. I mean, I can't give you I'm by no means an expert in it, but it's something I'm playing with. I'm trying to get it kind of figured out. What's the best tool for doing it? Because if there's one thing for certain, it's amazing how you can go down a river that's, you know, a foot deep and throw a coal shad out there. And it seems like the biggest, baddest mofo and the whole river just comes swimming over to it. Like, I will try that. And they usually smoke it.
We got Brian Slayton in here saying the 6 cents draw that's coming out will be incredible. I've been hearing that from quite a few people. That's going to be legit.
Yeah.
And then, dude, I'm going down this rabbit hole of glide baits. I've been triggered.
I bought a Pro KGB. Found one.
Oh, yeah?
Found one.
Yeah, but you got the perch one.
That's fine. We live in the north.
Yeah, it's
perch eaters.
Bone or go
I saw somebody posted it. They had it in their hand, that little 6 cents glide. And I thought, that's what I need right there. And that's a whole nother thing. Cause like, you're not going to go out there with like especially if you're like floating a river or doing something like that. Like you don't want to go out there with a glide bait rod. You just want to go out there with like a 7-6 flipping stick. And like, it's all you need, you know? And so, yeah, I'm interested. It is, dude, it's a rabbit hole, especially those smaller glides. I think that
the chopping styles.
I think, dude, the potential.
And look at what Milk. I mean, not that he's throwing that small, but like look what Milken did on Toledo.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a perfect example.
Carl Jocumsen on Chick.
Exactly. And like, I think those smaller, more manageable glide baits are the perfect, like in between. I'm not going out here to try to catch one giant fish, like dream catchers, but I'm trying to get a bunch of bites. And if the bite's going to be a bite, it's going to be a better than average bite. That's what we were talking about the other day. He said like the 6 inch, like mag draft or 6-inch cull shad is the perfect bite getter. And normally the bite is that better than average fish that can really help you out a lot or just turn your day around or whatever. If you're in a tournament, it helps you out, but we also like to catch big fish.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think like the whole world of 5 to 6-inch glide baits is a whole new rabbit hole we're probably all going to go down and have a ton of fun with.
You saw a lot of it with the herring guys on Murray. They were all throwing it, especially the jointed style. But yeah, I got from Omnia one of the 9-inch, 6-inch draws in bone as like, don't think I'll get many bites on this, mostly just pike, but I just want to like have fish show themselves because that's what I find fun in glide because I haven't gone deep into it yet. Like the most I got was like the Savage Gear Shine Glides that throw like a damn helicopter. And yeah. So I get this thing, and dude, I kid you not, I tied on for the first time in practice for my tournament this past weekend. It's within my first 5 casts. I catch a 5.5 pounder on it. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, I'm hooked. You got me sold now. I'm like, I'm screwed.
I remember last summer when we went out fun fishing, the like 3 times we went fishing all last year, you threw the Arashi one, and like that 10-inch smallmouth blasted it on the drop. I'm like, you stupid fish.
Here's the deal, dude. Like, that's my experience with glide bait so far. The biggest fish I ever caught on a glide bait, I caught it on a 5-inch Shine Glide.
Yeah.
The smallest fish I ever caught on a glide bait, I caught it on a Depths 250, and it was not even as big as the bait. And it's like, I feel like there's like this weird, like you're either going to catch monsters or you're just going to see a bunch of monsters, or you're going to just hook like, Moby Little Dick, not Moby Dick. Like,
yeah. Oh, that's hilarious.
I love Brian Slayton in the comments said it's finesse gliders. Yes. It is like the rise of the statement. Who was Iaconelli said, this is finesse cranking. I was like, no, bro, cranking's cranking. Just because you throw a shatter at don't make it finesse. I think glide baits are going to be glide baits are glide baits. Just because it's 4 inches and not 12 doesn't make it any different.
Never mind. I guess.
Hey, listen, buddy. It ain't the size. It's how you work it. All right.
Indeed. Is that why you're not catching them?
Probably. It could have something to do with the size too. I'm not sure.
I'm just messing. Dude, that was like my route into this stuff was, I think it was you and Caleb that kept talking about the Shine Glides, and I finally bought one, and it was the first Bassmaster kayak event. Like, I think it was 3 years ago, I think, in the fall on Chick. And it was that super cold week we got. And I was so excited because my literal pattern was running bluff walls, like super parallel with a Shine Glide. And I caught like 2 over 5.5 in practice.
Yep.
And then of course it got to 80 degrees in the weekend.
Yeah.
But like it was that like kickstarted the, hey, yeah, you can catch fish on big baits. Not that a Shine Glide's big bait, but at that time for this New Yorker, a Shine Glide was a big bait for me.
Oh yeah, dude. And it's fun. And I think the problem with the big swim baits is people go, I think if you want to go down the rabbit hole of turning into Oliver Nye and just throwing big baits, that's cool. Do it, because it's this very specific thing where you're hunting a big fish. Like, it's like killing big deer. But if you want to use it as a tool, there's a certain size of bait where it gets too big, where it's not just a tool to catch a bunch of fish anymore or get bites.
Don't tell Milliken that.
Well, but that you're talking about a dude there that has perfected. And I told Bailey, we were texting about this the other day. I said, he's perfected an art. I was like, show me somebody else that's doing what he's doing. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's people out there, but like, he has perfected the art of getting these fish on forward-facing sonar to react to these big baits. And I think that is a whole avenue within itself too, where the forward-facing sonar big bait thing is very, very unique. Because not only are you dealing with a fish that probably doesn't normally see a whole lot of baits, but then you're presenting it with a bait that Chris Zaldane said this. Normally, when they see something that big, it's not fake. Yeah. And like, I think when you combine those two things together, then you're really getting into something that's like super deadly, where you can put together a 29-pound bag in an open and just spank everybody's ass like you did, which that made me very happy. I just want to let you know that it was one of the most satisfying things that I've ever seen, because everybody was like, at the beginning of all that, I said, and I would tell Milliken this to his face, I said, he's either going to suck or he's going to beat their ass, but I'm leaning towards he's going to beat their ass. And he's going out there and he's beat their ass, and I love it. Like, it is satisfying to watch. And so, yeah, but it's very interesting. It is a rabbit hole, and I can't wait to get live on the boat and toss some bigger baits at some fish that I see offshore just to see. I want to see if I can figure that out. I want to see if I can do that. But I do think that it's an art what he's got going on, man. Like it's crazy. It's cool to watch.
Yeah, and that's what's nice about the north here is that our crystal clear water is I can see this 9-inch glide bait and bone 100 yards away, and I could see if it's being waked down or not. So like we don't need to look at them on live the way Ben's doing it, but I'm certain it's working, and I'm definitely not trying it this year in New York at all. Not doing it.
Nope. I think it'd be terrible. You definitely won't catch a 10-pounder on Cayuga. No way.
No, definitely won't exist. I'll quit fishing if that happens.
No, you won't. You'll go after an 11, obviously. Like
no, I leave New York probably. You'd be like, all right, I've conquered New York. I'm out.
So realistically, do you think there's like an 11 to 12-pound fish in Cayuga or any of those Finger Lakes?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
I think they live in areas that are untapped and they're smarter than us. And it's just who's going to figure it out first.
So it's like hunting a big deer. Like it's like trying to kill a 200-inch deer. Like you can do it, but you better be ready to dedicate some time to it.
They're probably in that area that nobody ever fishes. And there's that one magic honey spot on like an 8-foot deep flat. And it's like, oh, there's one stick here with one piece coming off it. And that's his home.
Yep.
380 days a year because there's only 365.
Yeah.
He just never leaves.
He's like that one fish that Dad caught 6 times, but he's actually big and nobody.
Yeah, and nobody's ever caught him before.
This is the stuff I think about when I'm trying to go to bed. Like, we have lakes, Alex, that are 400 feet deep, and there are 8s and a halfs getting caught in the biggest community holes on these lakes. And there are sections of the lake that are, these places are huge.
Yeah.
Like in regards to like, especially how long they are. And for the most part, pending the weather, they're very hard to get to manage. And it's like, there are certain sections where it goes from the bank, you start walking off your dock, right? And you're
deep.
Yeah. And so like there could very easily be a laydown that's right there. There's a small flat for that fish to come up and feed. Yep. And it goes back to sit on his log that's in 10 yards off the bank, but it's in 30 foot of water, that for them to sit on and live their entire life. Because a lot of our lakes, like there's a lot of bait coming back and forth, especially in the summer months with our alewives.
And they're just that drop as their channel swing, right? That's what they're following. It's that hard drop right against the bank.
I think
so they don't have to move. Like I feel like it's a no-brainer that they're there, and especially on the lakes that are connected to Lake Ontario, because now they're spitting up gobies.
See, I think there's 2 untapped potential areas where the big stupid fish live. Small rivers and creeks that nobody's jacking with.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that come to fruition around me where it's like, I've never been there. Let me drop a crescent in there and see what happens. And you catch a 4-pound largemouth in literally inches, not feet, inches of water. And you go, okay, well, if it can live here, what else can live here? And then you go catch a 40-inch muskie and you're like, in literally inches, not feet. And you go, okay, what else can live here? Like if that can live here, then a 10-pound or 11-pound or 12-pound bass can live here.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second one is these extremely deep lakes. I think lakes that are just stupid deep, where fish can suspend, where they can, like you said, just one little flat with a tree on it, whatever. I think that those are the 2 places where we as anglers, as untapped potential, can go find ginormous fish outside of Texas and Florida.
I think we have a class of fish in New York that's that 6 to 7, maybe even 8-pound class that roams with our lake trout in the summer.
I would not.
Smallmouth 100%. I'm a firm believer, and I kind of tested it this fall, that the biggest smallmouth in the lake roam with walleye. I think they just follow walleye around and eat bait fish.
Yeah, so I could see that. I mean, there's been times, dude, I've been sitting on one of these Finger Lakes, and they come up schooling on alewives. On like literally, the nice part about the kayak is like it's very subtle.
Yeah.
It's not a big boat and like they came up and started schooling right next to me, and it's brownfish, Lakers, and there was green ones, and it's over 30 foot of water.
Yep.
So I mean, like you see it happen on Murray, you see it happen on Norman, and all these other lakes. Like largemouth can school with them too. I mean, you see it like with like the stuff Ben's putting out on his channel. Of like these giant, like he's like, yeah, that's a group of 10 of them. I just caught an 8.5 pounder on him, and like they were all the same size blob as that. Like,
and that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm amazed by is that art that he's. I mean, it's an art is what he's doing because he's figuring out. Not only has he figured out suspended fish, but he's figured out suspended big fish, and it's like I agree, dude. I think some of the biggest smallmouth I've ever seen in my life on Cherokee, Norris, Douglas. I caught because it showed itself in 76 foot of water. It come up and it popped a gizzard shad, and I threw over there with a crankbaiting. I caught a almost 6 pounder doing that one time, and then I started to think, what is that smallmouth doing out there? Well, then forward facing sonar comes along a couple years later, and it starts taking 23, 24 pounds to win tournaments again. And you go watch these dudes, and they're throwing Alabama rigs at fish that are suspended over 150 foot of water. And it's like, oh, there's a whole group of fish out there that we don't know about. You know what I mean? And like,
now we do.
Now we do. And now the thing is now taking that and refining it even more and just figuring out how now do I get not these groups of 25 and 30 fish, but these groups of like 6 to 7 giants to eat. And man, I think fish do so many more things than we could ever imagine. And that's one thing that these creeks and these rivers amaze me with too, is like places that you think there is no way the fish is living there. That's probably the place that they're living, and they're living in nothing, but like it's a thriving ecosystem that we just don't even understand. You don't understand how they got there, why they're there, what they're doing there, but they're there and they're doing life, and they're getting big because everybody drives by it and goes, ain't nothing there. Or like when you're running across the lake, it's 150 foot of water and you go, there ain't nothing there. When really there's a school of 8 pounders, 8 pounders cruising around eating alewives. You know what I mean? And that's their life. That's what they do.
Chasing ghosts, basically, at that point. Pelagic bass are probably they are the hardest fish to like program and understand.
Oh, yeah. 1,000%.
I mean,
especially when they keep spraying our lakes, we're going to have to get used to it.
Dude, you got to think about the oceans. Like, think about the ocean as
I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to drive around the middle of the lake, find that floating log, and just live scope it, like mega live at 4.
Like, what is it? What is it? Mahi that does that?
Yeah. Mahi. They'll like lay on them to avoid dolphins and stuff. It's crazy.
Have you seen how they fish for like wahoo? Like where they literally are driving the boat at like 20 miles per hour.
I've done it. It's so much fun. Like you're literally running the boat at 40, and it's like, these things are like skipping out of the water, and all of a sudden a wahoo comes up out of 80 foot and just smokes it. Like, yeah,
that's nuts, dude.
Crazy, dude. It's crazy.
It is insane. Well, dude, we're gonna wrap things up here. You got anything coming up that the folks need to know about?
I got a video coming out Sunday. I got a video coming out Thursday. I dropped a short tonight. I'll have a podcast live stream Friday. I'll have another video Sunday. And then this week I'm going to West Virginia to fish with Mr. Drew Gregory and John Dalton. So that'll be fun. And then I come back for about a week, and then I go to Michigan. And so I'm going to be with my buddy, Mr. Benjamin Nowak and Caleb Bell. We're going to go look for 6-pound smallmouth. And so all those videos will be this way very soon. And yeah, just doing my thing, bibbity bopping.
I'm very jealous that maybe not of the weather, but that Ben and Zach are fishing with each other this week on St. Clair. I was supposed to be there this weekend, but Land's got her like final PT test tomorrow, and then we have our college alumni weekend that's freaking schedules this weekend. I would love to be fishing St. Clair right now. Maybe not with how the winds are supposed to be, but it's yeah. But
I bet they're going to
for folks. Probably. Those two know that lake so dang well, so I'm sure they'll have a lot of fun. But for folks, if for whatever reason you're not subscribed or following Alex, his social handles are below in the show description, whether you're watching or listening. I highly encourage you guys to do so. But buddy, always appreciate you joining us.
All right, I got orange, yellow, green, or really green.
Oh no, the soundboard. Hell yes. Andy, you get to choose. I got to choose last time.
I'm going really green.
Back before the war broke out, I was a saucier in San Antone.
There you go. Hi.
Hey, this is why we need a soundboard, Andy.
Oh,
It has to be Cop's theme song for whenever Deacon shows up.
let's do another one. Let's do another one. Just cause blue or purple.
Purple.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
Yes.
All right, I'm done. I'm out.
I
I'll see
love
you
it.
later.
See you, buddy.
See you, man. Oh, man.
Always a riot. Always a riot.
Oh.
Well, dude, really fast before we turn the show out, I know you need sleep. You got a house full of ladies that are probably
What
driving
is
you
sleep
bonkers.
at this point? Like,
True,
what
true.
is- yes.
But for folks that want to go up and catch some big old New York smallmouth, how can they do so? And are there any availabilities?
Ooh, yeah, that's starting to get tight. July is starting to fill up. August is almost full. I'm only offering like 10 days in July and August, so 20 days total. And I have, I think, like 3 days left in July and maybe 4 in August. September is wide open. October is starting to fill up pretty quickly for big smallmouth and largemouth. I am offering electronic trips too to like help you tune in side imaging on hummingbird and Lowrance's, since I kind of know what I'm doing a little bit on those, and Bailey has taught me a lot just picking his brain all the time, trying to get it going. But yeah, we're booking up quick. Actually, I start this weekend, and I don't think I have a break from guiding until like the end of June. So I think I have like 41 days straight or something ridiculous, or 41 out of like 50 days in a row or something crazy. So,
Well, if folks in the, say, especially the summer months when largemouth fishing's pretty good and they want to come up, are you offering anything like that if they want to come up fish some grass in the summer or anything?
yeah, let's go frog fishing, flip some grass. Even if you like have a weak point like fishing docks, we can break down how to fish docks better and get up shallow. Like, all of that is available. I'm fully licensed United States Coast Guard for the big lakes, and anything that is not anything that's connected to the Great Lakes or ocean. So like some of the bigger Finger Lakes, you have to have that license, and I have my New York State Guide license, so I can go just about anywhere that we can imagine. And yeah, it's going to be a fun summer, and I'm trying to keep some days open so I can fish tournaments as well. But yeah.
Yeah, and for folks that want to fish some New York largemouth, Andy is fiending for some largemouth trips.
Yeah.
See it in his eyes.
Yeah, that's all I've been doing. Like, I know I'm going to be smallmouth fishing for like 41, 42 days straight or something ridiculous. So I've like completely skipped Erie, because even though knowing it's been really good, I'm like, I'm going to be out there so much the next 2 months that I don't even want to think about it yet until this weekend.
Until this weekend, when it's going to be probably bonkers.
Yeah, probably. It's about to be silly. So,
Heck yeah. Well, folks, you guys check that down below. Andy's email and all that jazz. If all his socials are below, if you guys want to book a trip, highly encourage you guys to do so. But as always, appreciate you guys. OBD Williams coming on the show for Friday. If you guys don't know, he's a kayak and boat hammer out on the California Delta. If there's a tournament on the Delta, it's probably who I'm going to put my money on, whether it's a boat or a kayak, to win that thing. That dude has won some pretty dang big tournaments, especially over in California. I'm going to be excited to pick his brain on some oh my gosh, tidal fisheries, as well as just like people talk about how the Delta is so up and down. It'd be cool to learn about that fishery and some more California fishing. So make sure you guys tune in. Appreciate y'all. See you on Friday.